Some of you know me, most of you probably know. My name is Pedro Vela zquez. I'm an official of the European Commission working in the area of sport. I joined the Commission 24 years ago, so I'm a loyal civil servant of this institution. I'm very happy to work for the European Commission. I'm very happy to work in the area of sport and to defend some perspective in this area. Actually, to work in the European Commission is not so bad. Salary is not bad, and one has to live in Brussels, which is a very nice city. Actually, well, the weather is not so nice, but who can complain? The best thing of working in Brussels probably is that I don't have to go for lunch every Sunday to my laws. That's the best great thing. I stop with this small introduction. I have here a presentation with 22 slides, but of course I'm not going to use 22 slides. I wanted to use only a few of them. The idea, I think that it would be more interesting for you to have some historical perspective about what the EU does in sport and why the EU is involved in sport, and which are the main historical moments of EU. I think it's probably more interesting to do this exercise for me than to go into describing again the communication that you have been informed yesterday and the day before, and then anyway during the debate we'll of course inevitably come into the different aspects of the communication. The first point is something that a professor of Loughborough University wrote in one very interesting article. Actually, it's not an article, it's a thesis, in which he studied the case of EU and the governance of football and how the EU had influenced governance on football. And the main idea of this thesis, wrote by Borja Garcia, is that the EU has been dragged into sport, that there has not been a will of the EU to get a competence in sport. The EU, you know which are the reasons why the EU is created historically, which are mainly economic. And the difference with sport is that historically, for a series of reasons and circumstances, the EU has been involved in sport without being proactive in getting involved. That's at least the point of Borja Garcia. I must say I share quite much this view. It's important also to know that the sport as a phenomenon and the EU share some similarities. Both are specific, have particular characteristics. The EU is a unique and strange animal in the world if you look at international relations or institutional developments. There is no any other kind of regional integration where member states or nations pull their sovereignty into a common box and share their sovereignty. And it makes the EU very different to any other international organization. Sport, of course, has a lot of specific characteristics that we will go through then, and we have seen during these 2 days. This is a peculiar activity that differentiates them from any other economic activities. And both, probably the EU, if you read the Olympic Charter of the statutes of the main international federations, and you go and read the article of the Treaty of the European Union, basically, at the beginning they share basically the same values in general. Sport, however, and the European Union have a fundamental difference in terms of governance. That probably leads to some conflict. European sport is governed at national and international level. Member states, nations, have competencies, they decide and they take action at national level based on their own sovereignty. At the same time, the European, sorry, I'm mixing everything up. European sport is governed at national and international level. So national federations govern their own sports, and international federations set universal rules for all the world. If we take the case of football, FIFA regulates the dimensions of the goals and a lot of elements, not only the rules for the game, but the way agents must intervene in this sector. But UEFA does not regulate football. UEFA organizes competitions. UEFA can take orientations, but UEFA cannot impose any rule to national associations. What UEFA can do is to impose rules that are applicable to their own competitions. So that's, sport is national, international, and we have EU, which is governed at national, at European level, because there are rules at European level that can be imposed only to the members of the European Union, but they are not universal, like the sport rules. And this leads to constant conflicts. I will speed up. There is one case, I wanted to mention something that I learned very recently, very interesting. All of you have heard, certainly, about the Bosman case. The Bosman case, that is probably the most popular ever judging of the European Court of Justice in any field, not only in sport. Well, I discovered a few weeks ago that there was a national case which was very similar to Bosman. Eastern case was it called. It's an English case based on the issue of retaining the transfer of a player at the end of the contract, as it was the case of Bosman. And the Court of Wales and England state in that case that the retention rules were a restraint of trade, so they were clearly against the retention of players at the end of the contract, exactly like Bosman. The main difference are two. One, as this case was decided in 1963, while Bosman was decided in 1995. No one knows about this case. Everybody knows about Bosman. Obviously, because the impact was different, because this case had an impact only in the UK. The problem with the Bosman is that it had an impact in Europe, and in the end, an impact in all over the world of football. And this is where a decision of the European Court can have a huge impact, even if taking the same decision as a national court. Competence of the European Union, very basically, we have three types of competence. You know all of this, but I put this slide here because out of the three types of competencies the European Union has, one is the first one, the most important, to regulate, like in agriculture or in competition law. The second, shared competencies, where you can address, give some directives, like in the media sector. You cannot directly regulate, but you regulate through directives, and then the member states regulate with national law. And then we have the third level, where the European Union can only support, to coordinate, to complement what the member states do. And this is the case for sport. We are here. We are not in the first part where we can regulate tomorrow the transfer system or the way agents work. So we are in a competence that we can only influence. So this is something, in my opinion, very important. It doesn't mean it's not important. I think the most popular program ever of the European Union is in this kind of competence. It's Erasmus. You would agree with me. That's the most popular, probably, and better appreciated. So one can do important things here, but one must be aware that one cannot regulate here. I will not go through the historical line because I will go very long then, but just wanted to show you that basically there has been a very important evolution in the way the European Union interacts with sport organizations in the field of sport. And there are some important moments here you can see where the relations were not very good, where there was a confrontation or permanent confrontation between the positions of the EU and most of the big sport organizations. Then the moment where there are new stakeholders that appear, leagues well organized, trade unions, the G14 that you all remember, the EuroLeague basketball. This has created a dialogue between the European institutions and dynamics between the European institutions that has led to change in the way sport is governed. Take the example of G14 and football. The strength of G14 is that they could invoke EU law. Through this strength, they managed to change the way UEFA was governed. And then when G14 disappeared, they create the steering, the UEFA, what's the name of the committee? Well, they create a new committee within the governance structure of UEFA where there is the representation of clubs, of leagues, and players. And this is something that was very new. Today, the same problem that existed a few years before in UEFA exists still in other sport organizations. So the work of the European Commission in this field, in the field of governance, for instance, has been a work of influence and soft influence, not direct regulation, but it has led to change. And finally, just to put into context, because we will have the communication now, the debate will raise many of the issues that are in the communication probably. Just to recall that 2007 is the adoption of the white paper on sport without having a sport competence, so based in other competence of the treaty, education, youth, competition, etc. The trick also, you must know, is that when the white paper was drafted, of course, we already knew the text of the article that was under ratification. So already the white paper was, even if based on existing competence, in mind, of course, there was some perspective. This is why when the Lisbon Treaty is ratified, we propose a communication that builds on the white paper and doesn't replace it. So the idea of this communication is to have, as you have heard these 2 days before, to apply a new coherent policy agenda, to set some priorities, to set some concrete actions within the limits of the competence that we can use. For the moment being, I will stop here, Martin, and rejoin you.